Right, our top story is, of course, from the US, where Donald Trump has, in fact, in a way, gone ahead with one of his big campaign promises. In less than a month of returning to the White House, US President Trump has delivered exactly what he promised in his campaign, launching a trade war. Trump has announced sweeping new tariffs on imports from Mexico, Canada, and China that has triggered sharp reactions from global leaders and financial markets. The tariffs, which Trump says are aimed at protecting American workers and industries, have sparked fear of economic retaliation from affected countries. A day after imposing these tariffs, the US president has in fact said that he would also be implementing tariffs on goods from the European Union pretty soon. While Trump excluded India from this round of tariffs, India still felt a blow. Days after a boost from the union budget, the rupee depreciated 67 paise to hit a record low of 87.29 against the US dollar. BSE, Sensex and Nifty 50, the Indian equity benchmark indices, also tanked. For more on this, let me go across to my colleague Rishabh Bhatnagar. Rishabh, so what has been the impact on the Indian markets as far as these big announcements by Donald Trump, US president, is concerned in terms of imposing tariffs on several countries?
Right. Tanima, you said it's been a month. It's been less than a month since Donald Trump took over. In fact, it's his 13th day. And it's on his 13th day that he has gone ahead and sort of launched a worldwide sell-off that we're seeing across markets. Nobody left untouched by this. We're seeing, as I speak currently, the European markets are falling. We've seen Bitcoin fall by about 6%. US crude oil has risen to over $74 a barrel. Indian markets, like you mentioned, also fell as low as 1% now. By the end of the day, they did recover to about 0.4 to 0.5% in the red. That is the Indian impact as well. But what we're currently seeing is how the European markets are faring, given the fact that he has gone ahead and said that Europe and the European Union will also be impacted by these tariffs. This has caused all sorts of investors to sort of wait on the sidelines now to see how Trump takes shape going ahead in the next couple of weeks. He has mentioned that India is a tremendous tariff maker. And though India is not included in these round of tariffs that he has slapped on, Indians and the Indian government has come up and also said that they are in a wait and watch mood. Every statement that is coming out of the White House is being read very, very passionately. They're looking into everything very, very deeply, intricately. And now it will be upon the Indian investors to see whether or not Trump sort of steadies the ship and how the global markets fare going ahead.
Right. Rishabh, very interestingly, as you mentioned, that the Indian government, of course, will be on a wait and watch mode. But what are you picking up in terms of what could be the next few steps as well? We've already heard that the Indian government is mulling on cutting import tariff on certain US goods. So is that one of the strategies diplomatically and, of course, in terms of the trade ties between US and India, that is something that the government is considering?
Right. US has been, and it is the largest bilateral trading partner India has. In fact, it is one of the very few countries that India is in trade surplus with. We are about $35 billion in positive trade with the United States. That makes us, and that makes the US an extremely important trading partner. We have in this budget also gone ahead and cut tariffs on a lot of US export products, something that is looked at as a friendly move towards the US. It is sort of a positive sort of a handshake that India has given to the US, saying that, okay, we are willing to cooperate with you. We are willing to wait. Don't treat us like your other trading partners. We are different. We have been a trusted country to you. And hopefully that is what the US also takes from this.
Mm-hmm. Right. Rishabh Bhatnagar there, thank you so much for joining us, giving our viewers a comprehensive understanding of what the impact has been on the markets and also some of the next moves that the Indian government is mulling. And to discuss this further, I'm joined on the show by Dr. Asif Iqbal, foreign policy expert and former consul of the government of the Republic of Suriname, and also Professor Scott Lucas, founder of EA Worldview and an emeritus professor of international politics in the University of Birmingham, and Richard Painter, law professor in the University of Minnesota Law School, former chief of White House and an ethics lawyer under the President Bush's regime. Thank you to all of you for joining me on the show. I just want to begin by taking first comments from all of you in terms of how this has, of course, been something which has been talked about even when Donald Trump was elected as the second president, even around the time of the oath-taking ceremony, how this is going to, in a way, trigger global uncertainties even further if there is a tariff war that Trump finally goes through. And it's already begun now. So your initial thoughts, starting with Dr. Asif Iqbal, on whether there's going to be now a certain period of uncertainty, global uncertainty, if we look at the world economy.
Yes, I believe there is going to be quite a bit of uncertainty. We have already seen in the stock markets today, the Canadian currency has fallen for the last 20 years. This is the first time we have seen such a big fall from 2003. And this is really a big missile drop by Donald Trump on the global, business, markets. And this seemed to be a very commercial and an economic crisis, which has become a very political now. And the fact that the Japanese markets have, dropped, the currencies have dropped, and I think it's going to be there for some time, till we see this whole thing unfolding and how, this arrangements are going to happen. He's already hinted that, with the UK, there could be a deal happening. And now the stock markets today in Asia, all the markets, they have fell very badly. And the European markets have also dropped sharply. And especially the car makers, they have also, quietly suffered today. So it has been quite a big, fall today.
Right. Professor Scott Lucas, your thoughts?
This is not just uncertainty. This is chaos, and this is destruction. And the tariff should be linked. It should be seen as part of something that's happening broader. First of all, as you noted, the immediate effects on China, Mexico, and Canada won't be isolated, that you're going to have markets and supply chains affected around the world, and they will affect India. But secondly, as I speak, the U.S. presence overseas is going to be shocked. The Trump administration is on the verge of closing the U.S. Agency for International Development, one of the most important organizations in terms of providing health security, in terms of providing economic security abroad. And then thirdly, and Richard Painter will know more about this because he'll be the legal expert in here, the Trump administration is carrying out an administrative coup, a coup right now. It has effectively suspended the rule of law in the United States so that it can carry out raids to scoop up the personal and sensitive records of all Americans. It has locked employees out of their offices. It has purged thousands of staff, including senior staff, and it is effectively telling staff they will not be allowed to work unless they pledge loyalty to Donald Trump, not to the Constitution, not to the US system, but to Trump himself.
All right, and Mr. Richard Painter there, your initial reaction to the move made by President Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, under the United States Constitution, it's very clear that Congress sets tariffs and taxes, not the president unilaterally. The president has very limited authority to simply declare a tariff without having a bill passed through Congress. And Donald Trump needs to work with Congress to set tariffs. There's likely to be court challenges to some of these tariffs. Second, the tariffs could precipitate an economic crisis around the world. The last time the Republican Party embraced broad tariffs was 1930, and legislation passed by Congress and signed by President Herbert Hoover in response to the stock market crash, and all that did was create the Great Depression. This could very well spread around the world, and some of our most important trading partners are now already affected, Canada and Mexico, the European Union, and yes, India is one of the most important economies in the world, the largest democracy in the world, and this could very well affect India even more so than it has today. A lot of people in the business community in the United States are very, very concerned about this. Donald Trump was not elected to precipitate an economic crisis. through his belligerent policies, and certainly not to do so without the consent of the United States Congress.
Right. Scott Lucas, Professor Lucas, coming back to you, as he was mentioning that, as Professor Painter was mentioning, that this is also a lot about how one of the main premises on which people voted Trump back to power, of course, is in terms of repairing the US economy. But this question also arises about who's going to be the one who's actually facing the brunt of this trade war that, in a way, President Trump has triggered. Because there are concerns being raised by experts that everything, more or less, the prices are going to go up because of course, how all the countries are connected in terms of the chain of supply. So it's not just China, Canada and Mexico at the moment. There are, of course, other countries who are also waiting for future announcements to be made. But this eventually is going to lead to a situation where there's going to be inflation, which even other countries face the impact of.
I think you've summarized that very well, in that you will see the effects around the world, not within months, not within weeks, but within days of what is happening. Asian markets are down about 2% today. US markets will probably fall about the same. If there are further tariffs, for example, in the European Union, the shock will be even greater. The rise of the US dollar against all currencies, including the Indian rupee, will mean that interest rate cuts are suspended in the United States, which will be a further drag on economic growth. Inflation will spike because when you impose tariffs, especially if other countries raise tariffs on you, you get into a process where both your exports and your imports are more expensive. But the question then is, okay, fine. People did not vote for this. They did not vote for Donald Trump to be an autocrat. They did not vote for him to effectively bypass US Congress, bypass the US Constitution. What happens if he cannot deliver on his promise to make the US economy better? And then you face a further threat to the US and the world, that he simply will go even farther. He will blame other countries for the mess he is creating. He will blame migrants. He will blame asylum seekers. He will seek greater powers, claiming that there is an emergency. So we are only at the start of the shock that takes place. And I think the question for India, for my country, Ireland, for the European Union and other countries is, how do we work together to limit the damage that will be caused by this man and by those close to him, like Elon Musk?
Right. Mr. Richard Painter, what can be done by other countries now who are watching this, Trump's next move for that matter? What can be done by the global economy in a way to protect themselves if they can?
Economy that is interdependent, where business leaders are dependent on each other. And the business leaders around the world need to talk with each other, talk with their American counterparts who have connections in the White House. A lot of the very prominent bankers in the United States and lawyers who are working with the president also work with companies around the globe. And everybody's in this together. And the pressure needs to be brought to bear on their American counterparts to persuade the president and Congress to have a coherent economic policy that promotes growth and promotes global growth and that doesn't send the world spiraling into a trade war, which, as I said before, could very well precipitate a depression as it did in 1930. So this is an area where there needs to be a lot of very honest, open discussion in the business community. The Wall Street Journal, a very conservative publication in the United States, has already come out against these tariffs. And that is the type of dialogue that needs to continue. And then the Republicans in Congress will let the president know that this is unacceptable and that we need to once again have a policy, an economic policy, a tariff policy that's made through cooperation and collaboration, right, designed to expand growth rather than precipitate a trade war and economic disaster.
Right. Right. Dr. Asif Iqbal, Scott Lucas, and Richard Painter, thank you so much for joining us on the show for this very important discussion.